We're back here on a Locked On crossover of Hoosiers and Ducks. I'm Jacob Goins of Locked On Hoosiers. He is Spencer McLaughlin of Locked On Ducks. And we got some questions about this Oregon team because, look, Spencer, I have my own questions about Oregon, and I put those out on the internet, and some people liked them, some people did not, about has Oregon been tested enough going into this game? Because as fun as it probably was for you guys to beat Oklahoma State, Oregon State, and Northwestern, I'm sorry, I just can't. I can't give you the credit that you want for beating those teams. Going on the road to Happy Valley is exciting, but then they lose to winless UCLA, and it's just it gets kind of murky. So, are the Ducks ready? Are the Ducks tested? Are the Ducks going to be able to get up for a game like this, where it is a top 10 matchup? It is at home. College game days there. I'm not questioning Dan Lanning. It's more so of the guys that he's going to be coaching. Can they be ready for a matchup like this? Because Indiana will be.
Yeah, I don't know that this concern is inside of my top 5 or 10 or even 20 for the Ducks going into this game. Will Dan Lanning have them ready to go? You know, the games that Oregon has lost during Lanning's tenure, the only one where they didn't look ready to play was his very first game against Georgia, and that was just never going to be a victory anyway. It was worse than it should have been, but quite frankly, that's the only time you can say, wow, Oregon just wasn't ready to go in a big game. You look at Ohio State last year, and they started well on offense. They had an early interception on defense that the officials screwed up. You look at the Big Ten championship game. They had a 28-10 lead. You look at Penn State last year. Offense definitely sluggish against against a talented Penn State defense that didn't play great last week. And I will continue to reinforce this idea because I do firmly believe it. Oregon broke Penn State's will to play. James Franklin has all but admitted that publicly, saying, yeah, we didn't respond to the Oregon loss very well. Yeah, that comes down to the head coach. But, you know, a point, and I get why the Hoosiers fans look at Penn State and say, oh, look, they were that. It came down to coaching end of the day, and also realize that Penn State, that's come up so close and yet so far in those big games, was one play. They were one play from winning the football game. They had a touchdown lead in overtime, and Oregon was faced with a 4th and 1 after a non-targeting call that made me again question why we have this rule in college football at all.
Yeah, that was wild.
It was wild.
I mean, is that the one where they said he hit him with the hairline?
The hairline. Yeah, he got him with the hairline. I'm like, wait, what happened to forcible contact to the head or neck area?
Hairlines, but,
yeah,
it's fine.
Yeah. Doing his best LeBron impression over here. But, you know, I just look at what happened in that game, and I understand why it would be emotionally crushing. And it's not that Penn State can't get back, but, you know, a point I've made about Penn State this week is the quality of that roster didn't change. The quality of their preparedness did. And execution, that did change. And I think that went to their mental wherewithal. If you gave a better head coach that Penn State roster and that staff, Penn State would be a much better football team that beats Oregon and doesn't have any problem with UCLA. So, no, I don't think that there's a worry in my mind. Frankly, I wonder if Lanning uses that as motivation this week. If he doesn't compile some clips of people saying, oh, see, Penn State were frauds. You got to prove. Hey,
I heard he's watching Locked On Hoosiers this week. That's what I've been told.
Yeah, you should make that a goal this week, Jacob. Get clipped into Ducks versus them at the end for a motivational piece of information for the Oregon football team. That would be pretty awesome, frankly. But
yeah, that'd be sweet.
But yeah, so on the question of do I wonder whether Oregon, you know, is going to be ready? No, because you know what you mentioned earlier with Lanning, I think does permeate with the players. Mentally throughout the program, which is, yeah, they still haven't won that national championship, and that's all that's left. I don't think that, you know, Florida State peaked against Alabama earlier this year. They're not a bad team, but they're not a great team. They're fine, but they peaked this year because they were trying to accomplish goals that are much smaller than what Oregon has. I don't think a single guy in that locker room is going to come out satisfied, complacent, content, anything like that, until Oregon hoists that trophy at the end of the season.
Well, what's so fascinating about this matchup, and we'll talk about the Indiana perspective in our last segment, but the fact that both teams are coming off a bye, right? I mean, it's a top 10 matchup where both teams had the extra week to prepare. And you're talking about two of the best coaches in the game when it comes to game planning,
Yeah.
preparation, and then in-game adjustments when necessary with Dan Lanning and Kurt Cignetti. And one thing I've noticed about the Oregon offense is the balance that they have between passing and rushing, whether it's Dante Moore using his arm or the army of backs that Oregon is using on the ground. Do you believe that they'll stick with that, or if they find something to be successful, they'll just hammer that against this Indiana defense, which is still underrated? People still don't want to talk about Brian Haynes as one of the best DCs in the Big Ten and in college football, and he's going to come after Dante Moore, who has looked so good so far this year, Spencer.
He has, and I think the balance is a big reason why. If Oregon finds something that works, that they're not going away from it. I just think that this offense is in many ways rinse and repeat with regards to what they do on Saturdays, because it might look a little different each week, but fundamentally they're trying to accomplish the same sorts of goals. Get Dante Moore settled into the game early, have the ability to take some shots down the field, use the RPO game, and all of that. And I think that Will Stein was really good, frankly, on September 27th in Happy Valley, the last time we saw this Oregon team play, because you look up and, only 17 points in regulation. Well, Jim Knowles is really good, and Penn State's defense is really talented, and they were at home, and they were off a bye. Like, all those advantages went in Penn State's favor, and you look up, and why did Oregon win the game? Because they were 5 of 7 on fourth down, and you can't do anything but give a lot of credit to the OC in a spot like that. So, yeah, I think that Oregon's balance has been their best weapon. Like, Dante Moore's passing numbers are really good. They're not, going to set any records.
I mean, 14-1 on the touchdown interception ratio.
Yeah, it's great. It's why
that's incredible.
Yeah, that's why he's the betting favorite to win the Heisman, combined with the fact that Oregon won one of the games of the year at Penn State, and that, Dante Moore was a big reason why. And you can't overlook his legs in the conversation. It's not a primary feature, but he can certainly do it. We saw that against Penn State quite a bit. But, I think that for Dante Moore, like, he more than anything looks like a even better. I'm trying to figure out how best to phrase this.
Who do you want to compare him to? Who do
Bo
you want
Nix.
to compare him to? Okay.
Statistically, he doesn't look like he's on track at the moment to put up the numbers that Bo Nix did. Bo Nix in that 23 season ended with like over 4,500 yards passing.
He may not have to, though.
That's the thing. But what made Bo Nix so good in this offense was his ability to make good reads and make high-level throws, but just execute. Execute over and over. That's what Dante Moore is doing. And the reason I say, even though the numbers might not be there, he looks better, Dante Moore can make throws that neither Bo Nix or Dylan Gabriel consistently made. Gabriel in particular, Bo Nix has a better arm, but hey, they're both starting NFL quarterbacks right now. Shout out Dylan Gabriel. Too bad he's on the Browns. But I think that Dante Moore still has another gear, and that's being more consistently explosive in the pass game. But when you go up against good defenses, turns out it's going to be tougher to take those sorts of shots down the field. So long-winded way of saying that, I feel good about Oregon's offense, where they're at going into this game. And I think the balance of weapons, the number of different ways they can beat you, something Joel Klatt talks about a lot that I like hearing, they've got answers. They can run it. Yeah. They can create explosive runs. That was a problem last year. They've done that very well this season. They can throw down the field, intermediate, short passing game, screen game. Like, there's nothing really that they've shown they can't do. So with him at the controls, it's hard to not feel good about this Oregon offense.